Alright guys, so today I wanted to look at a birth chart that is a little bit intense. We're going to look at the birth chart of Noelia Castillo Ramos. So trigger warning, we're going to look at things about SA, grape, things like that. So if you are not comfortable listening to that, then don't watch this video. But if you guys don't know who Noelia Castillo was, she is this 25-year-old girl from Spain that elected to be euthanized after basically fighting the government because she just endured a lot of trauma in her life. She was raped by multiple men. And I can only imagine the pain of living with that. And then she tried to herself by like jumping off a building, and then that left her paralyzed. So then, after dealing with like so much literal mental pain and physical pain, she's like, I don't want to exist anymore. And she finally, won. Now, I don't know what your feelings are on, being electively euthanized, but I wanted to look at her birth chart because it's just so interesting. It's so sad what she went through, but you could see a lot of this pain in her birth chart. Okay. Now, we don't have a birth time, but we can still get a lot of information just off of the planetary energy and what the aspects were doing the day that she was born. Okay. So in her birth chart, and I'm going to put a picture of her birth chart, we see that her sun actually is in Scorpio, okay? And this defines the who I am energy in your life. This is your ego, right? So Scorpio individuals are already very intense, and their life does tend to attract circumstances of pain, death, abuse, betrayal. I'm not saying that if you're a Scorpio, you're going to experience that. It might just be like you go through intense transformations. But the interesting part of her sun, it's so interesting because I'm also a 22-degree sun in Scorpio, so I was just so touched by her story. But anyways, the 22-degree in Scorpio is a kill or be killed degree, if you look into that. So it's interesting that she just chose to kill herself, her soul, her ego, who she is. You know what I mean? In a way, okay? Because otherwise, society, the government, her sun is in opposition to Saturn, which is like authority. They were going to do that to her energy, like they were going to keep doing that to her energy, keep trying to take control of it. So it's just interesting that, again, that 22-degree in Scorpio. I also noticed, again, going back to the sun opposite Saturn marker here. So the sun opposite Saturn person is going to be restricted in some way in their life. In this case, I think the Saturn energy is really her father. I think her father was really pushing to not let her decide what she wanted to do with her life. And there's interviews of her saying like, why does he want me to exist? He doesn't even visit me. He doesn't even call me. I call him more than he calls me. And I think, Saturn and Taurus, maybe the father's very, very stuck in his, ways and, whatever. But I feel like there was also oppression even before all this happened, maybe from her father. She just didn't have a good relationship with her father, the sun Saturn energy. And then on top of that, the sun is in Scorpio, and just in general, with the sun opposite Saturn, I think it can create trust issues, and it can create somebody that is strong, but they are controlling it or trying to keep it at bay until one day it explodes, right? And it just goes back to pain. I just don't think she could deal with that pain anymore. Now, I don't know what her moon sign is. Depending on what time she was born, the moon could be in Gemini, or it could have transitioned into Cancer at that point. So we won't really talk about that, but there are other things in her chart. One thing that I see that is very, very painful that relates to her wounds is this Chiron Pluto conjunction. And when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, like existing in that does feel terrible, right? Like, so Chiron is our deep physical wounds, and Pluto is our psychological wounds. And so Chiron, she was paralyzed, in Sagittarius, which is the legs actually. So she couldn't move. And I think there was immense energy coming from the Pluto wound, which Pluto does represent just these negative things like, grape. You think about Pluto being Hades, who basically kidnapped Persephone and raped her in the underworld, right? That is Pluto at its worst, okay? So you put these two together, these are both, really painful things. And that was something that she was constantly living with. And not only that, then it's in opposition to Jupiter. So that pain was immensely, immensely expanded, okay? And then the other thing that I saw in her chart was that Mercury is in Scorpio, right? So there's an obsessive energy in her thoughts every day. I think it's really hard sometimes when Mercury's in Scorpio to let go of pain. You can transform it, right? But like I'll get into this in a second. I'll get into her Saturn return. But the Mercury square Neptune aspect makes somebody very, very, very intensely sensitive. It's like if Mercury maybe was with another planet like Mars or something, there would have been more mental strength and an energy to fight back. But Mercury square Neptune, it's like, let me just take my loss. Let me not fight back. Let me escape because this pain is too intense. And I'm thinking about it constantly, ruminating. And I can't, because of the Mercury and Scorpio, right? The obsessive energy. But it's so interesting because had she not made, this choice, which I'm going to respect her choice because, of course, I can only imagine like going through that level of intense trauma with a big T, and then, not being able to move. And it's a lot, right? Had she though like overcame all of that, I mean, she would have made such a powerful like trauma counselor. You know, the Scorpio, you know, can transform all of the pain that they lived in their life into changing other people's lives. And then the Chiron and the Pluto and Sagittarius, you know, just this great wisdom. But I think that there was a lot of circumstances outside of her with that Sun Saturn opposition. You know, Saturn representing all the authority figures in her life, the government that were oppressing her, right? On some level, because you think about these men that did that to her, they're still out there free. And, you know, she lost her freedom to all that trauma, you know, with Chiron and Pluto and Sagittarius. So I wanted to just take a look at her chart, you know, and let me know if you guys have any insights or anything else that you see.